Winter, northern Iceland, -40 outside. Wind tears across open ground at 50 miles an hour. Nothing survives exposed to this, nothing, but beneath the snow, behind walls of compressed earth 2 meters thick, a household of 25 sleeps. No furnace, no chimney, no insulation from a factory. The air inside hovers around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Warm enough to work, warm enough to sleep, warm enough to raise children. Now consider your house. Double-pane windows, fiberglass in the walls, a gas furnace that costs $3,000 and burns fuel every hour of every cold night. The moment that furnace stops, your pipes freeze in 48 hours. The Viking system ran for 6 months straight. It never broke down. It never needed a fuel delivery, and it never sent anyone a bill. This video is about how they did it, and the final layer has nothing to do with construction at all. In January 2019, a polar vortex hit the American Midwest. Temperatures dropped below -50 Fahrenheit in parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin. Furnaces across the region ran non-stop. Some failed. When they did, families had less than 48 hours before indoor temperatures fell below freezing. Pipes burst, walls cracked, people evacuated. These were modern homes, insulated, sealed, heated by systems designed in laboratories. Now rewind 1,000 years. The Viking Age, roughly 790 to 1100 AD, overlapped with what scientists call the medieval climatic anomaly. That name sounds warm. It wasn't. Climate data drawn from ancient shell deposits and seabed cores shows that winters in Scandinavia and the North Atlantic settlements averaged around -6 Celsius. In Iceland and Greenland, far colder. But raw temperature was only half the problem. The defining feature of this period was savage swings between seasons, abundance and scarcity, trading places like clockwork. 6 months to grow everything, 6 months to survive on what you stored. One failed harvest, and children go hungry. One flawed shelter, and a family faces the dark unprotected. Viking families in Iceland faced temperatures worse than that Minnesota vortex. Not for a week, but for months at a time. Their walls had no fiberglass. Their only manufactured heat came from a single open fire pit. And yet, generation after generation lived, worked, and raised families inside these structures. So either they understood something about heat that we've forgotten, or we've been solving the wrong problem all along. There's this image most people carry around. A dark, smoky hut where miserable Vikings crouched around a fire and waited for spring. Primitive shelter. Last resort. That image is wrong. The Longhouse at Borg, in the Lofoten Islands of northern Norway, stretched 83 meters, nearly the length of a football pitch, 9 meters high at the ridge. Stand at one end, and the far wall disappears into shadow. That's not a hut, and people who build on that scale are not improvising. What archaeology reveals across hundreds of excavated sites is consistent. Every element, wall thickness, roof composition, interior layout, the positioning of animals, served a calculated purpose. These builders worked without physics textbooks. They didn't need them. Centuries of trial, failure, and refinement in the harshest conditions on Earth gave them something better than theory. It gave them precision. But the real shift in thinking is this. Modern heating asks one question. How do we produce more warmth? The Vikings asked a different one. How do we stop it from leaving? That single difference reshaped everything they built, from the soil in their walls to the smoke beneath their roofs. The first thing a Viking longhouse did was disappear. In timber-scarce Iceland and Greenland, builders didn't stack logs. Wood was too rare, often salvaged from driftwood that had ridden ocean currents thousands of miles from Siberian and North American coasts. Every usable log was precious, reserved for roof beams, door frames, and structural posts, nothing else. So the walls came from the ground itself, dense turf, soil woven together by centuries of grass roots, cut into heavy blocks with long-handled spades, dried for weeks, then stacked in interlocking herringbone patterns, each angle chosen to distribute weight and resist collapse. Some walls reached 2 meters thick at the base. Touch one, and you'd feel something unexpected, not crumbling dirt, a surface with real density to it, solid enough to knock on, but with a slight give under your hand. The ideal mix was roughly 60% plant roots and 40% sandy mineral content. And here's what made it remarkable. Soil is full of microscopic air pockets. Still air is one of the best insulators that exists. The Vikings had no word for R value, meaning insulation resistance, but they understood the principle behind it centuries before anyone did. And the walls did something no modern stud wall can do. They stored heat, absorbing warmth from the interior during the day, then radiating it back slowly through the long Arctic night, like a stone left beside a campfire, still warm hours after the flames go out. Except the stone was the entire house. There's a real debate here among researchers. Some say this was intuitive. Builders simply copied what worked, generation after generation, without knowing why. Others point to the precision of turf selection, the deliberate wall taper from base to roof line, and argue this was calculated design refined across centuries. Instinct or mastery? The evidence supports both. That's what makes it worth arguing over. Drop your view below. Your walls at home? Standard fiberglass insulation resists heat transfer reasonably well, but it has almost no thermal mass. The moment your furnace shuts off, those walls have nothing stored, nothing to give back. The temperature starts dropping immediately. A Viking turf wall was slower to warm, but once it absorbed heat, it held on. The home didn't just resist the cold. It remembered warmth. Your walls don't. Here's where the system gets clever. Because the central fire pit, the hearth that every documentary focuses on, wasn't actually the main heat source, the cattle were. During winter, livestock moved indoors. Cows, sheep, goats, horses, all brought into a section of the longhouse called the byre, connected directly to the family's living quarters. Walk from your sleeping bench to the animals, and you never stepped outside, not once. Anyone who's worked around large animals in a closed barn on a winter morning knows this feeling. You open the door, and it hits you. A wall of warmth that no heater produced. It's just there. Steady, constant, unmistakable. The numbers tell the story. A resting human produces roughly 80 to 100 watts of body heat. A single dairy cow? 1,600 watts, continuously. One cow. The same heat as a room full of people from an animal that asks for nothing but hay. Now, multiply that. A typical Icelandic farmstead kept 8 to 12 cattle through the winter, plus sheep and goats. Together, those animals could push well past 12,000 watts of steady heat, around the clock, every night, for 6 months. To put that in perspective, that's enough to run a small electric radiator in every room of a modern 3-bedroom house, simultaneously, all night. No electricity, no fuel deliveries, no moving parts. Just dried grass converted into constant warmth by biology. The Longhouse captured every watt. Livestock areas sat slightly lower than the living quarters. Warm air rose naturally into the spaces where families gathered and slept. No fans, no ductwork, just architecture shaped by a simple understanding. Warmth doesn't need to be created from scratch. It can be shared, redirected, and sustained by living systems already present. As we explored in our previous video, Viking crews on the open Atlantic shared body heat in sealed hide sleeping bags to survive the crossing. On land, they scaled the same, principle up, using animals instead of crewmates and turf walls instead of seal skin. Different scale, same logic. The Norse didn't invent one solution and abandon it. They adapted it to every environment they entered. But even with walls that stored heat and animals that generated it, the system still had one massive vulnerability. The solution they chose is the one detail most accounts leave out, and it came with a price the Vikings paid with every breath. If this depth of detail is what brought you here, a like takes 1 second and genuinely helps. Now, let's talk about what they did with the smoke. No chimney, not one. Across every Viking Age longhouse ever excavated, Scandinavia, Iceland, Greenland, the Faroes, no evidence of chimney construction has ever been found. This wasn't an oversight. It was the hardest decision in the entire system. A chimney is a hole in your thermal envelope. The warm air you need to survive rushes straight up and out into the Arctic night. In a modern home, we accept that loss because generating more heat is cheap and constant. For the Vikings, it wasn't. Every unit of warmth was earned by fire, by livestock, by human bodies packed close together. Letting it escape through a vertical shaft would have been reckless. So smoke from the hearth rose and gathered beneath the roof. It formed a dense, warm layer near the ceiling, an invisible blanket trapping heat below where people lived and worked. Small wooden vents in the roof allowed controlled release. In the coldest months, those vents stayed nearly shut. The smoke did more than hold. Warmth. Soot settled onto wooden beams, coating them in a layer that repelled insects, slowed moisture damage, and delayed rot. The smoke was preserving the structure from the inside out, year after year, but the cost was real, and it wasn't small. Experimental archaeologists have lived inside reconstructed longhouses with modern air quality instruments. Carbon monoxide sat between 5 and 22 parts per million. The safe threshold is 6. Fine particulate matter averaged 0.8 to 3.4 milligrams per cubic meter. The World Health Organization considered 0.025 safe. That's up to 136 times beyond what we'd allow today. And when food hit the fire, particulate levels surged past 20. The air became something you could almost chew. If a modern real estate agent had to list a Viking longhouse, the disclosure form would have been longer than the building. Ventilation, none. Air quality, hazardous. Ceiling visibility, limited. Asking price, your lungs. Every winter came down to the same impossible choice. Seal the vents and keep the warmth, but breathe air that damaged you slowly, year after year. Open them and clear the smoke, but feel the cold pour in within minutes. The Vikings chose warmth. They paid for it with stinging eyes and shortened lifespans. It wasn't comfortable, it wasn't healthy, but it worked. And unlike your furnace, it required no external energy supply, no grid connection, and no repair technician. Every solution so far dealt with what happened inside the longhouse. But the Vikings also controlled what happened underneath it. Your house sits on the surface, exposed on all sides. Viking longhouses didn't sit on the land, they sat inside it. Excavations at Stone in southern Iceland, a farmstead preserved by the eruption of Mount Hekla in 1104 AD, revealed a floor level well below the surrounding terrain. The structure was dug into the earth before the walls ever went up. Stone foundations created a drainage barrier. Then the walls rose from below grade, wrapping the interior on every side with packed ground. Here's why that mattered. Surface air in an Icelandic winter swings violently, -40 one night, -10 the next. But just 1 meter underground, soil temperature holds steady near 0 Celsius all winter. By setting the longhouse into that stable zone, Viking builders gave themselves a baseline temperature that never dropped to lethal levels. The earth wasn't just supporting the house, it was warming it, passively, constantly. Modern earth-sheltered homes use the exact same principle. Architects call it ground coupling. There are firms charging serious money to design this today. The Vikings were doing it with spades and stone 1,000 years ago. And there's a detail most accounts skip. The entrance? Longhouse doorways were deliberately low, barely chest height. A short passage, sometimes bent at an angle, separated the outside from the interior. Cold air entered, but lost momentum in the turn. Warm air from inside had no straight path to escape. Today we call this an airlock. On submarines, on spacecraft, on Antarctic research stations. The Vikings solved it with a low door frame and a bent corridor. Your front door opens directly into heated space. Every time someone walks in, warm air floods out. The Vikings eliminated that exchange with nothing more than a curve in the hallway. But the system didn't end at the walls or the doorway. The Vikings had one more layer, and this one they didn't build at all. Here's something the standard accounts rarely mention, and it may be the most elegant part of the entire system. Viking roofs were alive, literally. The structure started with wooden rafters, precious driftwood, carefully positioned. Builders spread birch bark as a waterproof layer. On top of that, heavy turf slabs were laid like overlapping tiles, pressed down by their own weight. Over months and years, grass took hold across the surface. Roots wove downward through the layers, locking everything together. Over time, the roof sealed its own gaps. No maintenance required. It simply grew tighter the longer it stood. And then winter added one final layer. Snow piled across walls and roof lines, drift after drift. Where modern homeowners fight snow with plows and salt and heated driveways, Vikings let it accumulate. Fresh snow is roughly 95% trapped air, and still air resists heat transfer better than almost any material you can buy. By deep winter, some settlements were barely visible. Low mounds in a white landscape, marked only by faint smoke drifting from the vents. Beneath that frozen cover, temperatures near the walls hovered close to 0 Celsius, dramatically warmer than the -30 or 40 outside. Modern homeowners spend entire weekends battling snow with machinery. The Vikings treated the same snow as free insulation, delivered to their doorstep, perfectly fitted, no installation manual required. The only cost was patience. Anyone who spent a night outdoors in serious cold, whether that was a foxhole, a hunting blind, or a guard post at 0300, knows what wind does to you, and knows what happens the moment something blocks it. That relief isn't comfort. It's the difference between functioning and failing. The Vikings built that difference into every roof, every wall, every winter. Step back now. Look at the whole picture. No single feature kept these families alive. Not the turf walls, not the livestock, not the fire, or the smoke, or the snow. Each one alone would have failed. What worked was the system, every part reinforcing the others. Turf walls 2 meters thick absorbed heat during the day and released it through the night. A living furnace of cattle and sheep generated thousands of watts with nothing but hay. A chimneyless design held an invisible warm layer beneath the roof. The structure itself sat inside the earth, wrapped in a temperature that never changed. And winter snow sealed it all in natural insulation that cost nothing. A modern house in the same climate requires a furnace, a fuel supply chain, an electrical grid, sealed windows, and constant maintenance. Remove any one, and the system fails within days. The Viking system had no single point of failure. Nothing to plug in, nothing to break down. The Vikings didn't chase warmth. They trapped it. Every wall, every sealed vent, every animal brought indoors served that one idea: not more heat, less loss. If history told this way, the real problems, the real solutions, the kind of thinking that actually kept people alive, is what you come here for. Subscribing means you'll see what comes next. There is much more to tell. The next time your furnace kicks on at 3 in the morning, burning fuel to replace what your walls couldn't hold, consider this. 1,000 years ago, a family in Iceland slept through colder nights than yours. No furnace, no grid, no bill. Just earth, animals, smoke, and snow, working together the way they were built to. And that system never needed to be turned on, because it was never off.